So just to let everyone know, the meeting is being recorded for the benefit of the community to make sure they have all of the information and anyone who can't be with us tonight. And then all the slides, as Travis indicated, all the slides will be made available to everyone as well. We believe we're at the end of the planning phase of the study. You'll see us recap a lot of the things you've heard during the year. We're bringing you new information as well. And then we're really moving into what I would call the conceptual engineering phase. And we've done a lot of quality control on what we're calling next steps. So you know where we're leaving planning and where it's going to, say, a public involvement phase or an engineering phase. We have a major positive breakthrough with TxDOT. Those of you who were with us probably a year and 4 months ago when we got the original request, I asked to give the TxDOT district a chance to hear the wishes of the community, to see how they could respond. And they've responded extremely well. At the last meeting, we had shared with you our initial direction on a lot of TxDOT facilities, but we didn't have the benefit, since we hadn't met with them yet, of their reaction to that. So I think we have an awful lot of good news in this particular report. There's major recommendations that have still a lot of homework to go through. But sometimes the ball will now move from us to TxDOT, or us to the city, or us to DART. And we have dedicated persons who worked on all these details. So the people that worked on the details, I'm asking them to make the presentations today so you know them and the parts that they worked on. Travis is our gatekeeper. So he's worked diligently to make sure we stay on schedule and the quality control of all of our work, and make sure each of the teams is doing their part. So Travis, I publicly thank you, and to all our presenters today. Councilman, thank you for the confidence you had in us. You didn't know us at all when you said, hey, let's go see what you guys can do. We've worked very hard to earn your confidence. And Susanna, you and the community, thank you very much for giving us a chance to really think outside the box. I think you'll like 90% of what we have to say. You may not like it all, but we have a very different, positive future for your community, extremely different, and I think extremely positive. So I ask the community to hear all of our recommendations. We said would be comprehensive, and we're extremely comprehensive. We had some ideas that we're not moving forward with that you thought were silly, and we're eliminating those from further consideration. So the team has worked hard. Travis, I turn it back over to you to kick us off. Please keep track of your questions. Travis will tell us the rules for when we're responding. And we are here to, as long as it takes, to answer any questions that you have with regard to this. Speakers, remember the materials will be handed to all of the community. So try to go through your presentation relatively quickly, because they'll have time to digest it and to watch the video. But don't feel like you have to rush through your presentation. Try to catch the major points, because we do have a lot of recommendations for the community. So Travis, I'll stop there and turn it back over to you, and I'll be with you for the duration of the meeting.
Thank you, Michael, for that introduction. So I'll just start us off with a little bit more about who NCTCOG is, because I know some of you may just be joining us relatively newly within the project. So we are the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the greater Dallas-Fort Worth area. The 12 counties you see on this slide are part of our planning area, and we are led by our Regional Transportation Council, which is our policy board that helps us determine the transportation actions we take to improve the effectiveness and the social equity of our system. Our role is to allocate federal funds in support of projects and programs that improve our transportation system. We create a long-range transportation plan that outlines that. If you live in this planning area, you are represented by that council, and the city of Dallas is represented by 4 council people, 2 citizen representatives, and the county is represented by 2 commissioners on staff. This slide we've presented before, just this reiterates our objectives with this project. You know, we are here to advance transportation safety and
Travis,
transportation
I
access.
just want to make sure you said
Sure.
2 commissioners. Those are elected officials, not staff persons.
Right. Yeah, county commissioners. Thank you, Michael, for that clarification. Yeah, and as I was saying, you know, our some of our objectives here are to improve bicycle safety, pedestrian, and transit travel, very multimodal, address the traffic impacts on the different scenarios of the love field entries, with the goal of helping to calm traffic on Northwest Highway and make that more livable. Also to advance economic development and other opportunities that could be realized with more context-sensitive roadways. And as you'll see tonight, we want to follow through with the 10 ideas that we brought up over a year ago at the beginning of this project. So just a little background about where we've been over the past year. We started with this request from the city of Dallas to focus on the transportation changes that were upcoming in the neighborhood and some of the challenges and the needs in this part of Dallas, and really wanted to determine a safe, beneficial path forward. So you'll see throughout that past year, we've hosted a number of public engagement opportunities, meetings, and notably, we spent a great deal of time making sure we got our technical analysis thoroughly reviewed and developed throughout this past year. And so as Michael mentioned, we anticipate this evening being our final public meeting for this engagement effort. So this evening, we'll start with a little background on our 10 focus areas that were presented last October. And then we'll move on to talking about our recommendations and some related information. And finally, be very clear about our next steps and offer sort of some timeline for the future. So, you know, the project started, as we mentioned, with the 10 ideas that were focused on the 10 sort of general needs and families of ideas that you see before you. So this evening we'll go over recommendations for each of those and next steps for each of those. They will not be presented in a 1 through 10 order, so we've moved them around so that it's a logical presentation, and hopefully that is helpful to you guys who are listening to this. And the supporting information that maybe goes into a little more detail on some of these will be made available on our project website. If we don't cover every detail this evening, you can visit our website, nctcog.org/Bachman area, to find out more. So the first item of the 10 that we would like to just mention was our goal of refocusing our study area to really hone in on the transportation needs. As you can see, we listed some data-driven factors that we used, as well as stakeholder input to determine the boundary that you're going to see in all of the material this evening that we've been using throughout this study process. And details again on that can be found online if you would like to follow up on that. Our next item, which was really important as we got started with this work, was to coordinate with City of Dallas staff on past funding, past plans, as well as reviewing and communicating on upcoming funded projects. And so the significant coordination and preparation really needs to continue before some of that funding that's in place can be used. And so we certainly encourage that to continue. But reviewing these items and coordinating with city staff was really important to informing the recommendations we are making for really many and all of our 10 items this evening. So, you know, as we started this project, one of our initiatives was to really gather your feedback and your comments, and that's been a priority to include that as part of this effort. So as you can see, since the fall of 2020, when we got started, we made several efforts to both digitally and in paper collect feedback and comments from all of you, and we are glad we received hundreds of comments and responses, as you can see. And we are going to provide, if we haven't already, on our website, the results of many of those efforts for you to read that feedback if you would like to see that in detail. And as we did with our previous meeting, you will also have a chance for comments this evening as well. So looking back at what we heard from everyone, here are the results of our comments from our last virtual meeting, which took place on August 5th. We categorized the comments into supporting and opposing ideas, as you can see there on that chart. So we've taken some of those ideas with a lot of opposition, and we're not carrying those forward, such as the recreational island idea. However, throughout this evening's presentation, we're going to respond to many of those items, and you'll see some follow-up information that addresses those concerns. So we'll start with recommendations for bicycle and pedestrian improvements. And I'd like to introduce Stu Burzett with NCTCOG to talk about the analysis here that he did. So Stu.
Thank you, Travis. Like I said, my name is Stu Burzett. I'm a transportation planner on the Sustainable Development team. I've been working on this for the last year since I started at COG, really. And I'll be presenting bike ped recommendations, but also the needs. So way back in March, we presented crash data that indicated pedestrian safety issues were in this, or a lot of pedestrian safety issues in the study area. But this also matched our public engagement. So the major themes that we saw in our public engagement were like the needs for new sidewalks and trails, new major street crossings, and strategies to address traffic speed and visibility. Each bullet under those themes on the slide shows a stat from the community survey, but this was very common. These were very common themes throughout our other public engagement as well. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we have our bicycle facility recommendations. Our overarching goal was to connect the study area to regional trails like North Haven Trail and various Trinity River trails, as well as the DART stations and other recreational amenities. We're recommending about 6.6 miles of bike facilities to be implemented by the city, and about 4.5 possible facilities. And we mark these as further study needed. Basically means that they require a little more specific analysis to determine feasibility. So next slide, please. So on this slide, we have our sidewalk recommendations. To do this, we really coordinated with the city using their sidewalk master plan. And our overarching goal was to increase safe pedestrian access to recreation, transit, and other destinations. So we are recommending about 19 miles of sidewalks, 8.3 of which are what we call high priority. And most of this exists on Northwest Highway and around over Lake Drive in the Bachman neighborhood. So next slide, please. And finally, on this slide, we have our intersection/crossing recommendations. 13 locations were identified and recommended using the 4 categories as seen on the map. These improvements are intended to improve bike ped safety in the area and match with previous bike ped facility recommendations. So if you were to combine the last 3 maps together, it would show a systematic improvement for bike ped users. There are also 3 intersections that have at least partial funding and 3 that we marked as needing significant intergovernmental coordination because they're very critical in their function in the transportation system. So with that, I believe I'm going to pass it off to Jeff Neal.
Thank you very much, Stu, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this evening. So I'll be talking tonight about some of the proposed recommendations on the roadway side. And you can see that they encompass a number of not only facilities where we have to coordinate with TxDOT and the city of Dallas, but also, as you've heard in previous presentations, continuing to evaluate the potential for alternate Love Field access. And we'll go over each of those items for you this evening. Next slide, please. So just to kind of recalibrate, remember that although we have been focused a great deal on the Bachman Lake area to the north of Love Field, we expand out to this view to show you that there's a number of studies that are going to certainly impact this area and the vicinity of Love Field. And the purpose of our study has been to ensure that we're incorporating recommendations from these studies into this effort, that we're understanding their influences on each other, and ensuring that, not only are we focusing on trying to make enhancements that will benefit the neighborhoods surrounding Bachman Lake, but also ensuring that other neighborhoods, other land uses are going to benefit from this comprehensive approach. Next slide, please. One of those areas is certainly Harry Hines Boulevard, which you can see here, stretching from Northwest Highway to the south over to the University of Texas Southwestern Medical District, going into downtown. We're showing this again to you tonight to indicate that this study is ongoing, and we anticipate that it will continue on into the middle of 2022, with recommendations coming out at that point. And very much like what we are looking for here, trying to understand how we can make that particular facility more context sensitive, bicycle pedestrian friendly, conducive to a lot more of the more modern urban design inputs that we're seeing happening in many other areas across the community. And of course, it has a very critical connection to the Bachman Lake area, especially in that it ties into one of the critical interchanges that we'll be discussing here momentarily. Next slide, please. One of the things that we want to continue to recommend forward is the pursuit of more bicycle pedestrian capacity along Northwest Highway. The idea is that when this and other ideas were discussed with TxDOT, they were receptive. That's one of the things that Michael had mentioned at the outset. That was certainly very pleasing that we can continue to work with TxDOT on some of these concepts. This one here, as you all may recall, the notion of being able to connect the Bachman Lake area to a future northern neighborhood park at the end of this runway protection zone in the form of a land bridge, so that the bicycle pedestrian connection would be built on some kind of a structure, obviously needing to make sure that we're understanding the height restrictions that must be maintained in terms of what Federal Aviation Administration requires. And then if you'll go to the next slide, the idea is that we would try to incorporate a lot of landscaping, very unique design elements with this bridge to make it a gateway between the Bachman Lake area and other portions of the neighborhood. So it's really more than just your standard bridge. In fact, you have the recent land bridge that was built in San Antonio, one that is actually underway in Memorial Park in Houston. And then you can also see another example in Vancouver, Washington. These are some of the engineering and innovative elements that we hope to bring in to looking at this particular feature. Of course, with the notion that if there are additional sidewalks that are added to Northwest Highway, they would not be traveling through, they would not be traveling under this structure. They would actually be coming up to connect directly with the bicycle pedestrian facility that would be built over top Northwest Highway. Next slide, please. And so when continuing on with our discussion about projects where we'd be coordinating with TxDOT, again, we found TxDOT to be very receptive to these ideas. The notion is that if we're looking at trying to address lowering traffic on Northwest Highway, if we're trying to address a new entrance to Love Field that may happen on the north side, knowing that we want to try to use the corners, maximize access via the corners, then trying to optimize movements at these first three interchanges, at the northeast corner, at the I-35 Raceway interchange, at the Spur 482, Loop 12, and Harry Hines interchange, what we call the Spaghetti Junction with number 3. The idea is that working in those elements helps to potentially reduce capacity on Northwest Highway. The idea is that we would use Shorecrest Drive to be able to get the access into Love Field, but it's important to consider that today with Northwest Highway at 6 lanes, Shorecrest Drive at 2 lanes, what we would be looking at here is making Northwest Highway or some portion of it be reduced to 4 lanes, and then with Shorecrest also being 4 lanes. So you actually result in a net change or no net change in capacity for these particular roadways, and that's what we're hoping to accomplish with this here. Next slide, please. So the northeast corner, this is already a very congested area. TxDOT was very much.
Jeff, could you go back, and I think it's important for the public to understand the yellow arrows we added as a result of our TxDOT meeting.
Absolutely. So, we had mentioned back in August that we thought the section that could be reduced in capacity would stretch from Webb Chapel Road over to Webb Chapel Extension. It's entirely possible that with improvements at these 3 interchange locations, that the amount of capacity reduction or the limits of the capacity reduction might actually increase. And that's really what these arrows represent. They could extend farther to the east or to the west, but that certainly would be dependent on additional studies, additional refinements that we would coordinate, obviously, with TxDOT and the community continuing forward from here.
And just to add, number 2, if you're new to us, is a new interchange that goes in all directions. The spaghetti would go away. That would be eliminated. So you can extend the 4-lane section further to the west.
Right.
It's important to know 3 is not being added. 3 is being reduced. 2 is being added. 5 is being added, but 4 is being reduced. So what we're trying to do here is bring better balance to the community. And the critical part is to get this traffic back on Stemmons, as you'll see later in the presentation.
Absolutely. So here at the northeast corner, where you have Northwest Highway, Shorecrest Drive, Marsh Lane, Lemon Avenue, Webb Chapel Road, TxDOT understands how, with this area already being congested, there is already need for improvements. Add a potential new entrance into Love Field, and there's certainly the need to optimize movements however we can. So TxDOT is certainly receptive in us continuing to work with them to figure out how that might be engineered or designed. If you'll go to the next slide. One other very important thing to consider, and particularly because there were a significant amount of comments to that point in this area, is that bicycle pedestrian accommodations are incredibly important. Right now, you have an existing Webb Chapel bridge that is unsafe, that doesn't have appropriate bicycle pedestrian accommodations at this particular point in time. But it really is this area that is an important connection zone to a lot of different travel patterns, whether it's going north up to from the Bachman neighborhood up to North Haven Trail, or south down to Lemon Avenue, or east or west along Northwest Highway. It's certainly critical that if this bridge is to, whether the bridge is reconstructed or whether the bridge or new bridge is built in of itself, the idea is that bicycle pedestrian connections need to be optimized. They need to be separated from vehicular traffic as much as possible. So all that we're looking at when it comes to that interchange area within number 1 does include these critical bicycle pedestrian connections. Next slide, please. And so Michael had mentioned that we need to try to find a way, or we see how a lot of the result of a lot of traffic on Northwest Highway has to do that really is the only primary path for travelers to be able to use in this particular area. But if you open up access, an alternate access to Love Field on the north side by improving the current interchange at Raceway, which is really access to Harry Hines Boulevard, we think that we might be able to draw a great deal of that traffic away from Northwest Highway. And the idea here is, as we indicated, is adding ramps to and from the north. So there would be, basically a full interchange where today there's only a half interchange. But the idea is it would open up a much shorter and more logical path for travelers to be able to use, allowing Stemmons to be the primary mode where people can get from the north and from the west over to Love Field. Next slide, please. I should also point out, as with that interchange as well, is that also provides an opportunity when we're looking at new interchange design that we can incorporate bicycle pedestrian connections to the west, these connections over to Campion Trail. This area is also a location where that can be accomplished. But the idea here is this is an interchange that was very much overbuilt back in the 1970s. If we're going to reduce traffic on Northwest Highway, we need to de-emphasize these fast, high-volume movements in such a way that it doesn't need to cover this area, that it allows for potential new economic development opportunities, or certainly the ability to be able to preserve more land that readily gets flooded, and be able to address some of the stormwater issues that this large interchange can certainly contribute to. And so one of the major functions that we'll be exploring with TxDOT going forward from here is what kind of design options might we explore at this particular interchange. Next slide, please. And so from here, I will go ahead and turn it over to Chris Reed, who will discuss some of the recommendations and next steps coming from our evaluation of Love Field access.
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Reed, Principal Transportation Planner and Manager of the Subarea Studies and Thoroughfare Planning team. You may remember me from the public meeting in August and the previous meetings on this topic. For the last few years, our team has worked with Love Field and their consultants on their alternative entry study. And this map provides a general summary of their preliminary recommendations. As you see in red, recommended spot improvements, as you see, which may help with some congestion on Mockingbird or Cedar Springs, but don't address the need for an alternate entry. You see in green the 6 possible entries that were a focus of analysis. The orange lines show the alternatives that we actually ran through our travel demand model. And I'll go over some more of that information as we continue. Compared to what we showed in August, we have added some red X's. The red X's indicate alternatives that we're not recommending to move forward as part of this analysis, this traffic analysis. I'll go into more detail on the Denton Avenue one. I know there were some questions about that in the previous public meeting. We've indicated previously that the alternative number 1 is a no-go. We're not going to build a bridge over the heart of Bachman Lake. We're not going to impact Northwest Highway with a connection directly on that facility. We've been focusing on Shorecrest and to a lesser degree, Lemon Avenue. And I'll get into that further as well. Next slide, please. So we met in August. We received comments from the public, comments at the meeting, comments via email. We wanted to address some that pertain directly to the alternate entry to the airport. Some of these we're able to answer as part of this feasibility traffic analysis. Part of it will have to be further on down the line, whether it's in design or part of the larger study that the airport and their consultants are continuing to undergo on this initiative. But the question is asked is, why is an alternative entry necessary for Dallas Love Field? From a regional and traffic perspective, it's necessary due to the high levels of congestion that you see even today on Mockingbird, as you see in Cedar Springs. We've seen the way our model has trips going, the way we've seen surveys where 50% of the trips coming to Love Field Airport are coming from the north, necessitating a need for an alternate entry. Why are Didnt Drive and Lemon Avenue entrances not feasible? That again came up a lot in the meeting back in August. I'll get into very specific detail about Didnt Drive here in a minute. The Lemon Avenue entry, we did actually say that it was eliminated in August. That was basically eliminated from further analysis at our level, the traffic feasibility level. We did not place an X over one of the Lemon Avenue entrances in the map previous. That basically is still on the table, has not been eliminated. Why is an improved southern entrance to Mockingbird infeasible? The airport themselves have definitely laid out their need for additional entrances, whether if there's accidents or other issues going on at the airport, there needs to be another way to come in and out. They've been tackling that with their study. And for the regional level, again, it's better for regional traffic. Emergency only northern entrance possible instead of regular use entrance. Again, that's the airport can focus on that. We are looking at the regional traffic needs, the regional need for congestion improvement. The 4-lane Shorecrest Drive impacts to Bachman Lake, noise impacts. That will be further down the line in design, environmental. The airport and the city themselves say that any widenings of Shorecrest Drive will be within the right-of-way that already exists today. So that will minimize the impact. And the feasibility and cost of improvements for the different alternative entrance alternatives. We're tackling some of the feasibility, the cost of improvements that will go through the airport and their consultants, and as their study goes along. Next slide, please. So to tackle Didnt Drive, we wanted to go back and tackle the critical impacts of Didnt Drive. We were tasked to look into more detail, possibly modeling details or construction cost details. As we mentioned before, this entry has already been removed from contention by the airport and their consultants as of their outreach in the summer of 2020. We coordinated with them, we met with them and their engineers to go into more detail as to why Didnt Drive was removed. So normally I'm not a fan of reading over bullets, but I think for this slide, I think I'll real quickly just read down the list. For an automated people mover, APM and or roadway implementations, not possible. The runway is not designed to accommodate tunneling underneath it, especially for a roadway facility of this type. If considering the short distance between the terminal and Didnt Drive itself, there would be a greater than 8% vertical grade, making at very least an APM facility infeasible. It would not be able to handle those grades. The excessive roadway horizontal curves, basically to get down, to get under and get back up, the amount of curving you would have to do, turning on the roadway, it's not feasible from an engineering level. The airport has stated that their land constraints, they no longer own available land along Didnt Drive. And a major impact is the dark green orange lines in the Burbank station as kind of a hard corridor down alongside Didnt Drive that would not allow for any movements or any adjustments to an interchange for the expense of moving rail. And also the significant and lengthy disruptions to runway capacity and airfield operations during construction. Staff will be reviewing the Addison Airport tunnel construction method. That's something that we want to look into to see, well, there's for the tunnel at Addison Airport, how were they able to handle some of these issues, whether going under a runway, what kind of disruptions were there due to construction and what have you. In the meantime, our Regional Transportation Council, RTC, has funded 1.75 million in autonomous vehicles from the Inwood Luffield Station to the main terminal. And the airport is currently pursuing APM options from the north and the east. That's a study that's ongoing as well. Next slide, please. This map is similar to, it's identical to a map that we showed at the meeting back in August. I will, as I usually do, I will quickly explain what you're actually seeing as far as the colors and whatnot. This is a volume difference map where we have compared the Shorecrest entry alternative to a baseline network. I don't know if you can hear this, but I have landscapers right outside my window, so I'm kind of distracted right now. Perfect timing. So wherever you see, again, wherever you see blue, volumes have gone up. Wherever you see orange, volumes have decreased. So this is basically our recommended build out system map. This includes the entry from into Shorecrest Drive. This includes Shorecrest widened from 2 to 4 lanes as identified in the Dallas Thoroughfare Plan. It has been identified since 1991. It's received $2.5 million in funding in the current Dallas County Major Capital Improvement Program. So it's definitely in the books for both those planning agencies. If you look at the Harry Hines Stemmons area, you'll see the fully directional interchange at the Raceway interchange. And as well, this also includes improvements to the Spur 42, Northwest Highway and Harry Hines Spaghetti Junction interchange. So what definitely, and also this includes Northwest Highway reduced from 6 to 4 lanes between Webb Chapel Extension on the west and Webb Chapel Bridge at the east, with the possibility from TxDOT and others to maybe even extend that stretch of 4 lanes even further. Because what you can take away from looking at this is the airport, this is in year 2045 from our modeling, the airport will have approximately 38,000 trips per day coming in and out off of Mockingbird and up Cedar Springs. By adding the entry at Shorecrest, it effectively splits that in half. You're getting just over 50% are now coming in from the north. You see Ollie Orange, which is a decrease in congestion on Cedar Springs, Mockingbird, neighborhoods to the west and neighborhoods to the east. And with the interchange improvements, especially at Raceway, you're seeing a large decrease in congestion on arterial roads as they're now moving over to the freeway, which was designed to handle trips of that sort. We have a call out box of 38,000 daily trips in 2045. That's to compare to, there was a call out on one of Jeff's maps showing a 50,000 reduction or 50,000 total in our baseline scenario for a reduction of approximately 20%. And even that number is a tad misleading, because if you look as you go further to the west towards the Spaghetti interchange, the orange line widens, which says that the reduction is actually larger. And so that's one of the reasons why they'll be looking into maybe making Northwest Highway 4 lanes going even further to the west. Next slide, please. Thank you. So for the alternate entry analysis conclusions for the traffic analysis that we've conducted, leading into next steps that Travis will go into further in the presentation, we are recommending Shorecrest Drive as the potential entry, which will attract 18,000 to 19,000 daily trips out of the 38,000 in the year 2045. Widening Shorecrest Drive from 2 to 4 lanes and reducing Northwest Highway from 6 to 4 lanes will provide better balance for the community and better access in regional movements and less congestion. Modified I-35 interchange at the Raceway Harry Hines will reduce congestion on Northwest Highway, Webb Chapel, and sections of Harry Hines. And then the larger interchange improvement at Northwest Highway, Harry Hines, Spur 482, along with the Northwest Highway lane reduction, will provide significant congestion relief and economic development opportunities. And finally, DART and the City of Dallas will be pursuing additional transit access from the north to complement the RTC funded access from the south to complete this larger regional transit and roadway system. With that, I'll pass it to Travis.
Thank you, Chris. So I'm going to talk about another topic from our 10. So you've already heard most of those topics from our 10 items. This is economic development, which, as you've already heard from the presentations on some of the roadway changes, we believe that changing the design of many of these larger roadways and their intersections, notably the large intersection at Harry Hines and Northwest Highway and Spur 482, may make it more pedestrian friendly, which could attract new investment and really bring along an improved quality of life with a more context sensitive road. And we think this could be a significant factor in increasing the economic potential of this area. And also with economic development, we really looked at how we can integrate realizing greater economic potential through land use. And that will take coordinated action in both land use, economic policy, and transportation projects. Here you've seen some areas we identified as 2 possible focus areas, where various factors like the availability of vacant land may create an opportunity to catalyze positive revitalization in the area, along with the transportation projects. Now, of course, we recommend the city look at a further detailed study of possible economic and land use policies that would need to be complementing this effort. And the final item of the 10 is our transit coordination. So we did review the context of public transit in this neighborhood for the study area. Most significantly, as I'm sure many of you know, DART is revising their bus routes this next year. So that means much of the area around this area is going to transition to DART GoLink service or more frequent bus routes. And I think that makes the recommendations for improved walk access through increased sidewalk improvements even more important. Now, one of the main public comments we heard was this question of how will transit access to Love Field be improved? And as you've already heard, RTC has provided 1.75 million in funding for an automated vehicle upgrade to the existing LoveLink route. And as you heard from Chris, the Department of Aviation is studying possible transit options for a future possible alternative entry. And they're coordinating with DART on this initiative as well. So that is our summary of the 10 items. You've seen our recommendations for those and some details that go along with them. Now we're going to go into a summary of our next steps. And as you'll notice, these are going to follow the 10 items in order. So our first one would be following up on coordination with the City of Dallas. And so we believe they should continue to coordinate with the Dallas County on those projects that are funded and make sure those, as they move forward, are coordinated with other projects that are a recommendation from this study. Our number 2 item is our coordination with TxDOT. And as you heard previously, everything that really interacts with Northwest Highway will need to be evaluated further by TxDOT staff before it can be implemented. So in our coordination, as you heard with the TxDOT Dallas District, there is support for not only just redesigning and narrowing Northwest Highway, but looking at the long-term future where it is perhaps a city street rather than a state highway. And as these improvement ideas are refined, we of course will coordinate with these agencies and make sure as needed updates are made to our long-range transportation plan. So when we look at our third item, it's the responsibility of the City of Dallas to ultimately determine the final analysis and design of the second entry and to continue that engagement with all of you and the public and other stakeholders as is needed in that decision. And of course, as they do that, it's going to be important for them to make sure TxDOT is involved as needed to make sure improvements to the roadway system that facilitate a functional traffic flow happen in time to support, or at least don't reduce the conflict with the airport changes. And so moving on to number 4, the study boundary. There are no next steps for that. That was totally just about this particular project. So that is complete. And moving on to number 5, as with everything here, we recommend as decisions are made that affect the public, that all public agencies involved continue to engage all of you as projects move forward and closer to implementation As you know, our recommendations are planning recommendations. None of this is going to move to construction right away. So there will still be design choices and implementation choices to be made. All right, and so for number 6, for economic development, as we just stated previously, we think the city should look at a more detailed plan for economic strategies in those areas we highlighted that could be impacted, positively impacted by the transportation changes we're recommending. And of course, with our bicycle pedestrian improvements, as you saw in the presentation, we've got a number of routes and alignments and locations. So we know the city will need to design and identify funding for those locations we recommended to move those forward to implementation. And moving into our last set of next steps here, for the Northwest Highway Enhanced Pedestrian Crossing Pedestrian Cap, TxDOT's going to have to be involved, obviously, heavily in leading that effort because it is in their right-of-way and advancing those changes. The north-south bike and pedestrian access that will go from the airport area and crossing Northwest Highway is going to take coordination of multiple agencies working together, as we've highlighted there. Connected to that, improving the walk-in bike situation at the Webb Chapel Road Bridge, which we noted was a high priority, will need to be further studied by the city to see exactly how that should be addressed with that particular bridge. And item number 9, Harry Hines. So our agency is leading that study, and it will need to be completed. And it's an important roadway that intersects with many of the east to west crossings, and so those will need to be looked at in that particular context as well. And finally, with public transit, as we said, we recommend the city and DART continue to coordinate further on future options for transit access to left field. So those are the general next steps for our 10 items that we covered. Going forward, we are going to provide a final opportunity for comments that we will record and, of course, make available to the City of Dallas and other agencies. And we would like you to provide those comments by December 3rd. We are going to provide a link on the next slide. And after we get those comments, we'll document them and share them with the city and post them on this project webpage. And while our Bachman area planning initiatives that I've been coordinating here will be concluding, hopefully the end of this year, will, of course, our agency will be continue to work with all of our relevant local government and state government partners to advance recommendations as needed going forward. So now we are going to have time to discuss some of what you've heard this evening. I know we have a number of comments in the chat. So we're going to open it up for conversation in a minute. I think if you would like to speak and make a comment, please make an indication in the chat that you'd want to speak so we have an orderly way to recognize folks. And if you could keep your comments, within 3 minutes, relatively brief, so we can make sure everybody has a chance to provide input. And before we start that, if you don't want to make a comment right now or don't want to put it in the chat and you want to think about things, there's a link there. We're going to drop that link in the chat, both for Spanish and English. So feel free to take some time and write down your thoughts there. Again, we want those by the 3rd of December, please. And so I want to just take a minute and ask Carly, do we have any phone numbers calling in that are call-in only?
Travis, this is Carly. We do not.
Okay, well then I'm going to go through our chat
Travis,
comments.
why don't you ask the councilman if he wishes to make a comment at this particular point? I would save all the comments. Please keep all the written comments that have been written. And then I think we just opened it up for now verbal. People can continue to type in written comments so we can capture them, but I'd like to turn it over for people to speak. I don't mind them asking to speak in the order you have, but I don't want you to read the previous comments. We've captured them. We've had the agenda for 50 minutes. I want to make sure the public has the agenda for the remaining time.
That sounds like an excellent plan. So Councilman Narvaez, if you're ready and would like to speak, we'll turn it over to you.
Sounds great. And thank you so much. And again, Michael, to you and to all your staff at the COG for putting this together. Like you said, I think we're going to like 90% of all of this, and like overly like 90% of all of this. There's probably going to be some not likes on some of this, which I think you already see in the chat, some of the comments or questions, but I think that they can be resolved and or worked through. Just want to thank everybody who's participated over the last little over a year as we've got this started and kept it going. And again, thank you to Michael and the COG for, you told me the other day that I would probably like this a whole lot, Michael, and I'm liking it a whole lot. So let's hear from the community and the rest of the stakeholders and residents and see what they have to say, and we'll see where we go from there. And I also want to thank Council Member Jesse Moreno for joining us as well today. I asked him and Councilwoman Gay Donnell Willis if they could participate today, at least to listen and to help catch them up on what's going on here, since 3 council members are going to be part of this at some point. So thank you again, everybody.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you. So what I'll do now is recognize people in order of which they asked questions and see if they would like to speak. So Tim Dickey, I see you asked a question first. You may unmute yourself, please.
Yes, thank you. Actually, my question was answered about the question I wrote about what's more details on the automated shuttle that DART's proposing, but that was answered in the presentation. But I did just have a comment, and it has to do with I've never felt that the airport really made the case in any way other than when the director said, well, our job is to take care of our flying customers and the people that do business with us at the airport. And that intersection at the entry has failed. And that statement was challenged many times in the meetings, the good neighbor meetings that the airport had. People would say, well, I drive that all the time and I don't have any problem at that intersection in rush hour. And those were just dismissed. And so there's been an ongoing assumption that the airport needs an alternate entry. And I just feel like I don't feel that case has been made. Inwood is a much more of a failed street than Mockingbird ever dreamt to be. If you ever try to drive Inwood from basically Irving Boulevard to the airport or to south of the airport, can't do it. So I just want to make that comment. I understand that everybody's got a job to do and everyone's done a really good job. And I'm not saying anybody has bad intentions. I just don't feel the airport ever really made the case successfully to at least me and the community and people that I talk to, that they really do need an alternate entry. And there's just been a feeling that other than the airport wants to make its customers have the shortest possible trip, that hadn't really been considered, and that the community considerations impact on the community hadn't been factored in as everyone decided, let's go with an alternate entry somewhere. That's just a position. I understand we're on a train here and it's going somewhere. We'll end up in a good place, but I just don't feel, just want to say it, that the case has been made for the need. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, for your comments. I do want to quickly point out, I want to respond to a question from Rosa Escobedo that yes, the presentation will be translated into Spanish, and Norma Zuniga on our staff has posted a comment in Spanish in response to that. Now I'll ask if Susanna would like to unmute and make a comment.
Yes, thank you, Travis. I think, first of all, I'd like to echo what Tim Dickey stated, and I'm very concerned about, Chris, your comments specifically, because it felt like the North Texas Council of Governments is basically accepting what the airport is stating their needs are without providing to the community the supporting evidence for that. So we have heard in their Good Neighbor program meetings that they need an alternate entry for safety security reasons. It's no different than what they indicated to you. And I understand you're not airport experts, so how can you negate that request? But you look at most regional airports in the United States and they have a single entrance. In addition, as you look at security, having an entrance going between two runways seems to me very problematic. And as I've talked to airport experts, they indicate the same. We have some of those airport experts living in the Walnut Hill neighborhood, and they raised that issue to me. So my point is simply that when we approached our council members and they in turn approached COG to assist with this analysis last year, and Representative Anchia was on that call as well, we were very hopeful in a way because we felt that COG was going to be able to bring to the table not just this vast expertise regarding regional transportation and really an understanding of pedestrian and cycling, doing the necessary analysis. But really what we were told was that there was going to be this consideration for really designing with a community first approach. And the recommendations I've seen, such as making Shorecrest a 4-lane road and making Northwest Highway a 4-lane road, really takes away the quiet side of the park. And once again, it's predicated on the airport needs this north entrance. And we've never really received a good answer for why that is the case. So my comments have been, I think, very consistent in that regard. I, from day one, have asked for there to be some level of a task force where we have members of the community appointed by our city council representatives to really see what the data shows. And maybe Mr. Morris or Michael, this is maybe a request, maybe we can facilitate that and sit down, have your team sit down with the community to go over the data. I understand that this is a much broader group, but we have some transportation experts on the board of Friends of Bachman Lake, and maybe we can be assisted by the Coalition for New Dallas to see, is this north entrance, alternate entrance, really something that is needed when it's going to have such a huge effect on the need for green for the surrounding community. This is the only green space, large green space, that Northwest Dallas has. And you are basically surrounding it with 4-lane roads. I remain concerned. And maybe as Tim was saying, this is a train that left the station 10 years ago and we're fighting an uphill battle, but we have to protect Hines Park. We have to protect Fraser Dam. You're recommending an additional entrance onto I-35. But I'm going to cede my time. I would like to also hear from other members of the community that may not have put comments in. I think I know that there's folks very concerned about what's going to happen in that area of the Trinity, and we should hear from them as well.
Susanna, this is Michael Morris. 2 things I request. One is to hear from you and others on not just your dislike for the northern entrance, but your opinion on all the other recommendations we have. If there is not a lot of community support for these recommendations, they probably will not move forward because they're very expensive and somewhat controversial on their own. So if there is not an interest in a 4-lane Northwest Highway, I need to know it because we're going down a path to potentially create a more context sensitive design for Northwest Highway with a pedestrian cap into the park. So it's important for us to hear from you and others, not just on the things you don't like, but the things you do like. Otherwise, we'll have an unclear path forward. I also think your recommendation with regard to the airport is the only way it can proceed. I think there has to be a citywide task force and potentially, so all parts of Dallas can weigh in with regard to their interest, with regard to the need, the cost, the benefits, the implications of having two entrances. So that process, to my understanding, hasn't begun yet. I think the city has waited for our study to be completed.
So
But
Michael, maybe would it be possible?
I would think the path forward for the city is to create a citywide task force to look at the merits of what the future of Love Field should look like. Thank you for letting me respond.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the list, I want to make sure we give enough diverse people a chance to respond here. David has submitted a few questions.
Hello. I guess to piggyback off of the comment that was made earlier, I think there's warm reception to all the ideas. Coming from Illinois and Chicago, where 10, 20 years ago, they converted the city back slowly to being more pedestrian and bike friendly, and the roads being a shared model. I'm very welcoming and exciting about that, because moving to Dallas, I used to run marathons and all of a sudden the sidewalk just stops, or I'm biking and I have to patch together a way to get to Bachman Lake or to downtown. I just think the northern entrance suggestion is contrary to all the other suggestions that are being pushed forward. And I welcome everything. I appreciate all the hard work. I think it's really exciting to see the progress being made with the North Haven Trail and the loop around downtown Dallas that's going to be going in. But the north entrance does, to me, seem a little contrary to the interest. And having grown up or lived by O'Hare Airport and being familiar with that, I know that the influence the airport has or can have on a community. But I think I really appreciate everything you guys have worked on, and I'm excited to see it go forward. But the northern entrance on Shorecrest Shorecrest itself right now seems not the safest road to be driving on, with some of the curves, that if someone is 6 inches too far over, they can hit someone head on. So I'm not sure about the feasibility of making it a 4-lane road unless they take over more land. That's all I wanted to share, but I really appreciate all the work that's gone in.
Thank you for your comments, David.
This is Garrett Boone.
Okay, go ahead, Garrett.
Yeah. Sorry, I can't do the chat. Couldn't figure out how to do it.
Okay.
I share the same concerns that Susanna and Susanna and Tim Dickey said. I have not done the studies. I've not seen the studies, but I've probably been to Love Field 40 times the past year. I not once said, "Oh my gosh, I wish the traffic were better. It's terrible." I come on Cedar Springs. I've never been delayed on Cedar Springs. I've never been delayed getting a car at DFW Airport. 3 weeks ago, we waited 1 hour for a rideshare car to get through the lane at Terminal D. There's never anything like that at Love Field. So my own experience from literally probably 1,000 trips going back 40 years ago, and then maybe 40 to maybe 100 trips the last 2 years, is I don't understand why we're doing this. And so I am concerned about Shorecrest, because that is a very narrow space, and you'd have to build a 10-foot wall to create some kind of sound barrier. I think that's a very uncomfortable roadway. I'm sorry. The other thing is, I think this decision is totally does not take into consideration the Trinity River. I work with an organization called Groundworks is trying to actually restore the Elm Fork, which has been abandoned and neglected by the city since day one. And we're trying to bring back at least 1,300 acres restored land, and that entrance ramp off of Harry Hines going north on Stemmons will wipe out Hines Park, which is, according to a very well-known biologist, probably the most important collection of native plants and species in the city. I mean, it will wipe it out because it'll go right over the top of it. And it may well wipe out access to Fraser Dam Forest, which was created out of a landfill into a beautiful 110-acre park with hiking trails. So I think this is agnostic or uncaring in terms of its impact on the Trinity. And I'm concerned about whether the improvements. I know I applaud the various plans for biking trails and sidewalks. Those are all great, but I just don't see why we're doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Garrett, for your comments, and thank you for your work on the land restoration in the Trinity Basin. Tim, I see you have your hand up. In the spirit of those who don't have access to the chat, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge anybody who's called in and doesn't have access to the chat and would like to comment. I see we have a phone number on the line. Well, I think we'll give them a minute. Tim, is there something you would like to say?
Yes, thank you. Good point about positive, what we like. I love the plans along Northwest Highway, the overpass, the sidewalks that have been necessary forever. That's great. I'm a little concerned about the eastern intersection. It seemed tentative. To me, the intersection there, that intersection at Northwest Highway, Lemon and Marsh, is just such a disaster for mobility if you're not in a car. And even if you are in a car, you try to go east on Northwest Highway anywhere from 11 to 1 o'clock, and the right-hand lane's completely clogged up all the way back because of people pulling in to get their Chick-fil-A. And if you're in a wheelchair or walking or on a bicycle, it's just the worst. I've often thought of doing a video, in fact, to show how bad it really is. And so it seemed that the conversation on reforming that intersection was a little tentative about it's something we might get to later. And I would just encourage a really strong look at what we could do, because I know it's an enormous undertaking. I remember when it was actually done years ago, when they built the bridge that's there now over the creek at Lemon. And there were people who drove off that bridge and their cars were found in the lake years later. So it's fairly recent construction, but below it, it's a nightmare. And I just would encourage you to see what we could do about that as a top priority for the area. But I love what you've got on everything else. And I just had to mention the north entrance issue because that's kind of front burner for me. But thank you for everything you're doing.
Mr. Dickey,
Much appreciated.
Mr. Dickey, this is Michael Morris. You are 100% correct. It's not that we're tentative, it's that it's so complicated. And the only way we're going to get at it is to move it into the engineering phase. I don't want to waste more time in the planning phase because, we may have to move that current bridge that goes over the lake. Maybe that bridge actually needs to be moved over to the other side of the thoroughfare and try to get more visual space for the lake. It is so complicated. In our conversation with TxDOT, there's an eagerness to get it into the engineering phase to try to really start sorting that out. Jeff has spent a month on that intersection, and I said, look, we're wasting our time in the planning phase. We got to get more data, more cell phone data, more turning movements. If we're going to get support from the community to downsize Northwest Highway, we got to start looking at what the downsized volumes would be, because we're trying to take 20,000 cars a day off of Northwest Highway. That will have some positive implications in those intersections. But my comment simply is, you are correct. We're a hair shy on it because the details are so complicated. We're going to have to advance a lot of money to start advancing and working with the community and what those improvements would be.
Point well taken. Thank you.
Susanna, would you like to speak?
Susanna, you may be muted.
Susanna, are you muted?
I was muted. I'm sorry. Totally agree that we need to look at the Lemon Avenue Bridge. I wanted Jeff to be aware that there had been conversations in the past. This had just been an idea that had been floated out there. So I'm going to send you two just for your consideration since you're looking at that area to see if the Webb Chapel Bridge itself could be canceled as a vehicular bridge to make it a pedestrian only bridge. So that as you guys are redesigning Lemon, it's really with the concept of more of the vehicular, the Lemon Bridge, I'm sorry, with the vehicular component. And then the pedestrian cycling would be focused more on that old Webb Chapel Bridge. So that was one. And then the second is that as we're looking at that land bridge, I'm actually going to have three now, I think of it, over Northwest Highway and in the context of the Lemon Avenue Bridge, I know that there's going to be concerns about the traffic that could potentially flow north along Marsh. And so having COG provide a recommendation possibly for either a road diet or something that would protect pedestrian cycling traffic along Marsh, since it would be flowing potentially from Bachman Lake, might be an interesting thing for you to consider as a recommendation. And the third is, I loved all of the images that you provided for the land mass and kind of that access, something that is much more organic. And I would ask that you guys not forget the need for that type of connection to Hines Park and to the Fraser Dam from Bachman Lake. And the idea, because we have been mentioning this multiple times, that we have a regional aquatic center, a regional skate park that's coming, and there's no safe access. If we had something organic like what you're recommending for Northwest Highway to repeat on the Harry Hines side, if you imagine, it would be able to connect down to the skate park, connect over to the aquatic center, connect to the DART station, so that as families and kids are coming to the DART station, that's why that location was picked for the skate park, was because of the DART station. But there's no safe, I mean, they have to cross the street and they have to cross a rail line to get to the park. So I think it'd be very interesting to have that same type of organic. If they could do a bridge over 75 for North Haven Trail, why not a bridge over 35 or something like that, that gets us over to Fraser Dam and to the 135 acres that Garrett was talking about safely, and really create, instead of an island in Bachman Lake, create access to this urban forest that people can get to safely.
So I hope you realize we're not recommending an island in Bachman Lake.
No, but that was in the previous presentation. So I'm
I
saying
know, but
instead of that, if we could have
under-
another bridge elsewhere, that would be great.
You understand we're not recommending an island in Bachman Lake, right?
Not in this presentation, that's correct.
And not in any future presentation. The Harry Hines project has its own set of interests that are identical to the ones you see in Northwest Highway. And the Harry Hines project from Northwest Highway all the way to downtown is looking at similar design components: road diets, 4-lane sections, elimination of cloverleaf interchanges, creation of parks, pedestrian grade separation. So they're on their own scale. We wanted to make sure this community knew that Harry Hines project was going on. And the same questions that we're asking about Northwest Highway are being asked about Harry Hines.
Yes.
So,
and to the extent that this project, though, Michael, is recommending an entrance onto 35 through Shorecrest, that's kind of where the intersection ends up happening.
I understand.
Yeah.
And with the meeting being recorded, you may or may not send us those comments in writing, but with the meeting being recorded, our staff will have recorded your comments and we will have the benefit of those recommendations in our report.
Yep.
But please,
Thank you, Michael,
please eliminate from future thinking, we have an interest to try to create an island in Bachman Lake. I put that in there as some interest, and it's been eliminated from further consideration.
I have another question.
Okay, go ahead.
The airlines are the one lobbying for the other entrance. What's going to keep, if that's approved and that's built, what's going to keep them, and this is not sinister, their job is to have more flights. They make more money from more flights. What's going to keep them from then using that as leverage to lobby for a change in the right of to flights at a level? I mean, I would do that if I was an airline. Why would they not do that? We spread out the traffic. There's no congestion. Everything's great. We can handle more flights.
Well, first of all, I'm not aware of the Southwest Airlines wanting the entrances. I've had an initial meeting. I have other meetings scheduled with Southwest. I'm not sure they're all that excited about a second entrance at the airport. And I think one issue that has torn this region apart for a long period of time is the Wright Amendment and the repeal of the Wright Amendment. I'll go back over all the legal agreements necessary to go down the path that you suggested, but I couldn't imagine the city, the community, American Airlines, the region interested in changing whatever the already agreed upon commitments are for Love Field.
Okay.
So I will confirm from Southwest Airlines if they're interested in a second entrance. And I've heard no one interested in opening up that agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and I want to, we've got just a few minutes left, so I want to make sure we recognize people who had questions. Andrew, would you like to follow up on your questions?
Yeah, I'll just keep it brief because I wrote them in there, and we're coming up on the end anyway. But my first comment was really, you guys had mentioned that the Lemon Avenue entrance was previously eliminated, maybe, and then brought back on the table. I think, and really, I guess my bigger point would be, if we are going to rely on TxDOT to tell us what infrastructure changes are really feasible for any of these highways that they're going to have to design and build anyway. I think that needs to happen first before we can really have an idea what alternate entrances are really feasible or ideal or even necessary. And so I think, to Michael's point earlier, I think the idea of a task force with the city is a great idea. But I think until we can really get some of these bigger questions done, I don't think the COG should really make a recommendation about which entrances should be preferred or is better than maybe another.
Andrew, my request is to make sure you tell us which of our, 24 recommendations you're interested in, because regardless of whatever the city decides to do about the airport, we're interested in advancing those recommendations. I also think there's a sequence in which projects should proceed with, but I'm not going to start developing a sequence of projects until I find out what is the interest of the community in advancing the 24 projects. So I agree with you that you shouldn't be leapfrogging certain elements in front of other elements. You have to create a system. And to my knowledge, no one is trying to hoodwink the community into some interest on TxDOT that may or may not happen. If there's interest in the community on Northwest Highway, there's no reason why we can't proceed with Northwest Highway, period, if there is or there isn't an entrance to the airport. So I'm anxious to, it is clear to me what the community doesn't want. What's not clear to me is what the community wants. And if we got to go chase down a whole bunch of money, I better have a community that's really interested in what it is we're doing, or I shouldn't proceed. So supporting your point, we're anxious to move forward on several of the projects that impact TxDOT. TxDOT is excited about moving ahead on some of those particular improvements, unwinding the spaghetti, maybe a 4-lane Northwest Highway. I don't think you're going to get pedestrian and bicycle facilities along Northwest Highway without 4 lanes. So I agree with you. You got to create a sequence, but until I hear the interest, I don't have a sequence.
All right, I want to move on to Michael Cintron. Would you like to follow up on your comments?
Yeah, thank you. The Southwest question I had was about, have they been a party to these talks or discussions at all? Because I do share the concern also that it's an opening to upend the Wright Amendment at some point, but that's been addressed, and thank you for that. At least to the extent that I'm satisfied today. The other items seem very positive, so I do want to introduce that. It was a lot of good changes in the area and things that we have been needing with the cycling and pedestrian access. It's a little ambitious, but I think that's good. We need to go big. But also I'm trying to just scroll back to my question because forgive me. So yeah, we were told that from the start that Love Field would consider none of the above as one of the options, and that seems to have dropped off. And if anybody could shed some light on why, or if that ever was a real consideration, that would be very beneficial. And then finally, the airport seems to only have been considering cars using the tunnels and not a people mover system. So obviously those things would be tougher to do due to grade and other things. And those were my comments. But in general, there's a lot of positive out of this. I appreciate the efforts very much. The concerns are shared, what Tim, Susanna, and others have, Garrett, all of those concerns are mine as well.
Michael, the only thing I think worth adding is the RTC put in $80 million to have a station in Love Field when the light rail line was built. We did not support a light rail line that didn't have a station inside Love Field. Was willing to pay the incremental cost to make sure it happened. Lots of conversations between DART and the Federal Transit Administration resulted in that not happening. As a result, FTA changed their national rules and policies, so that mistake could never be made again. But as you heard in the presentation, DART and the airport, you heard we're funding the new autonomous transit system coming in from the south. And if there is going to be an entrance somewhere else, the city, with or without a roadway, the city and the transit agency are looking at getting transit to come in from the north. So that evaluation is underway, and that was included in our presentation.
All right, Corrine, would you like to add anything to your comment?
Travis, I think that whole group dropped off because of the translation issue.
Gotcha.
The fact that there wasn't direct translation. So they excused themselves later on.
Okay, well, we will definitely reach out to them to make sure that they receive the translated version when it's ready, and I hope we will have that ready next week. Okay, I'm going to move on to Dory. Would you like to discuss your comment?
Yes, I have, as my comment said, unlike Councilman Navarez, there's probably only about 10% of what's been discussed here that I do like. And that would basically be the pedestrian and bike-friendly proposals. I have really three questions. I wrote two, but I now have come up with three. The first one is that I'd like you all to address is, why are you not showing greater traffic on Northwest Highway off the tollway to a north entrance? People who live in Plano and Frisco, where I used to live, certainly are not going to be coming over to I-35 to get to Love Field. They'll come Northwest Highway and then to a north entrance. So I'd be curious why you're not showing more traffic on Northwest Highway. My second question deals with Shorecrest itself. It is a very narrow right-of-way. To expand to 4 lanes, it seems to me you're either going to be doing eminent domain and taking people's front yards on the south side, or else you're going to be taking parkland on the north side. And I guess as you're discussing this, even in its most general terms, I would like you to address specifically where are you going to get the land to make that a 4-lane street? And then my third comment is, this is the first time I've heard you all talk about the spur and the spaghetti mess, or whatever it is you call it. If you make the changes that you're contemplating for the spur, then for those of us who live on the Lovers Inwood area, how would you perceive that we would make a connection to get onto 183 and 114? Because myself, that's how I get there, is go Northwest Highway to the spur. So those are the three comments and questions that I would like you to respond to. Thank you.
So let me take the last one first, Dory. Obviously, we would have to go in and have a public involvement procedure when we're taking the ramps and the collector distributor system down. But we anticipate not changing the access points. So instead of you being on a freeway section or what we would call a collector distributor or what might be a ramp, it would be a thoroughfare street connection. But that whole design would have to go through, if people are interested in eliminating the spaghetti, that would have to go through a series of options and series of public meetings and an environmental procedure all on its own, for us to get public input on the best way to do it. We're not eliminating any of the access points. We're probably gaining thoroughfare street access because you have limited access in those movements. But you would be using the same, you'd have the same access points, but you'd be doing it from a more context sensitive roadway improvement. We have our mobility plan team examining the Dallas North Toll Road movements. We're in the middle of a mobility plan right now. So we're asking the same questions you are asking. Just remember that if you have an entrance to the airport on the south and on the north, the volume of traffic using the Dallas North Toll Road is going to be the same if they're interested in going to the airport. You're asking the right question. Would more of them wish to use Northwest Highway as part of that particular process? So are there constraints at the four-way intersection in 2045 that have so much congestion on the Dallas North Toll Road that it isn't a good facility? As you notice in our simulations, they're coming across LBJ and coming down on thoroughfare streets as part of that particular procedure, a particular movement. So we're asking similar questions. We probably have to do interim forecast for near term versus the 2045 timeframe.
It's just that your chart that showed the movement of traffic flows, it showed a reduction on Mockingbird coming from the tollway, but it did not show a corresponding increase on Northwest Highway from the tollway.
Yeah, so if we could pull that map up.
The volume difference map.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it was.
So you see a little bit of a smaller volume decrease as you just indicated on Mockingbird. Obviously that smaller decrease is due to having a second entrance. We think one of the deficiencies, one of the things that we think is killing Northwest Highway, it never dawned on me before, is you have too much freeway type access to Northwest Highway. See the two yellow spurs? And because you had no north-south access to the blue interchange, you almost have no other way. Forget about a northern and southern entrance. You have no wonder Northwest Highway is overloaded. You're pointing two major facilities to it, and you have such horrible access on the rest of Stemmons. Now, Jeff, in his work of Stemmons, said, boy, we seem to have it, regardless of what you do at the airport, you seem to have a deficient interchange with only access to and from the south. that access to and from the south is horribly overloading your Northwest Highway. So if in fact we're going to get bicycle pedestrian access on Northwest Highway, which I hope we do, the only way I know to do that, I think, is to go to 4 lanes. I don't think buying a whole bunch of right of way and keeping a 6-lane thoroughfare is the appropriate context. The interesting part for the community to debate is does it create a better neighborhood feel and create economic development opportunities along Northwest Highway to build a 4-direction interchange at the Blue and take the spaghetti down at Northwest Highway, regardless of what you do at Love Field. So if you leave the spaghetti up at Northwest Highway and don't build the interchange, you know what your future's like. If you go ahead, can you leave that map on for a second, Travis, please? If you go ahead and do one or the other, I don't think you'd ever want to build the Blue interchange and leave the spaghetti. But to really get a decreased volume on Northwest Highway, and this is where we'll go with TxDOT in the design phase. If we take the spaghetti down on Northwest Highway and we toggle the 4-direction interchange, keeping it 2 to the south and keeping it 4, what does that do to the volumes? If I can't get the volumes down on Northwest Highway, you're going to see a reluctant TxDOT. But if I can get the volumes down to 38,000, then I'm in the range for a 4-lane Northwest Highway, then I can bring the pedestrian components to that particular corridor. But that's part of the engineering that we're going to have to do with TxDOT. And if there's interest in the community from whatever inventory I get over the next month, we would begin that work immediately with TxDOT. And I think TxDOT is anxious to move forward and see what they can do as part of this particular effort. Unfortunately, everything you're looking at is toggled together with the entrance to the airport. But regardless of what the city does at the airport, I'm interested in seeing what I can do to create a more context-sensitive, walkable Bachman Lake area. I hope that answered your questions. Travis?
Thank you, Michael. And as you mentioned, we want everyone to comment and to please put your comments in writing if you didn't get a chance to say everything this evening, because as Michael said, we're going to pass this along to our partners, and so they'll be able to see your input and help them with their decision-making process. It is now past 7 p.m.
Pardon me, but could someone address the right-of-way acquisition issue on Shorecrest before you move on?
Yeah,
Are you taking parkland?
No, I apologize. I'm sorry. I didn't remember all the questions. That's my fault. It's my understanding, and I've asked 16 times, Shorecrest is already in the Dallas Thoroughfare Plan. We didn't add Shorecrest as a 4-lane facility to the Dallas Thoroughfare Plan. So it's already in there. It's my understanding the city is working on reviewing that. So we're being told there's no right-of-way take. I'm not taking that for granted. But if Shorecrest is going to ever be 4 lanes, again, regardless of if you have an entrance on the north or not, you would have to go through all those questions and 100 more to answer if it's a good idea or not. Where does the right-of-way come from? What's the noise impacts on the park? You're not going to have a 4F. We wouldn't be interested in taking any land from the park side. That triggers a 4F review. So all of that would have to go through a public involvement engineering element. At this level in the planning phase, that engineering work has not been done to answer your particular question. If Shorecrest ever gets pursued as a 4-lane facility, regardless if there's an entrance on the north side or not, all of those questions times 10 would have to be answered before Shorecrest could become a 4-lane thoroughfare.
All right, and we will document questions like that and everything that else has been entered into the chat in our documents we're going to post online. As I was saying, we have reached 7 p.m., so I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. and say thank you to everyone who took the time to engage with this project. We appreciate that. Here is our contact information if we can provide any more technical clarification, but I would also encourage you to provide your comments here. A couple of follow-up notes on questions. We will try to put the material on the website as soon as possible. We are dependent on technical staff to make that happen, so we can't guarantee it'll be there tomorrow. And again, I want to just say thank you, everyone, and please utilize our comment form, and we will pass these along to our partners. So with that, I am ready to conclude the meeting, and thank you, everyone. And Carly, I believe we can stop recording.
Travis, I wanted to, this is Susanna. I wanted to thank the community, as you're saying. I was amazed at the statistics you provided that over 1,000 comments have been sent in during the process that COG has managed. I don't know how that compares to other work you guys have done. I'm just really, I am so appreciative of the information that has been sent in English, in Spanish, and the continued outreach that you guys have done to ensure that everyone's voices are heard. So thank you to you, and thank you to the community.
Thank you. We
Thank
appreciate your participation. Thank you. All right, so